Happy Monday, and welcome back to another exciting week of the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, we go over the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed feature, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan, an airplane nerd from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So, Jim, here we go into minute 61.
Yeah. We're into the second hour.
The second hour. 61 minutes into this. It's incredible.
And we're back in a dog's head.
Yes, we're in the head of the dog, and Cliff is about to do some more rocketeering here pretty soon.
Yeah, he's getting used to it now, so he's getting it all strapped in. And like Billy Campbell was saying before, you never see him start to finish. He's always just finishing up.
He's just finishing it, exactly. Because look at the complexity of that. The harness through the epaulets, behind the sort of double-breasted thing.
I would think you'd have to have like
fantastic,
a dresser.
but
yeah, you need somebody else to do that for you, I think. But
absolutely.
And that's why Peev shows up. And I still that really is, the more I look at that vest, it is just a suit with the sleeves cut off. There's like pieces sticking out of it. And
yeah, it just looks like something Peev was at a drawing board and working away, and maybe noticed a little snag and just got frustrated and gave a sleeve a tug, and the next thing you know, he had a vest.
Now it's a vest.
Right.
Yeah. It hits me that all I need to do is cut the sleeves. I have a gray suit. I could probably do that too. I've already got the mustache and the gray hair. I think I could be Peev.
There you go. Yeah, just take the sleeves off, and then and if you have a house, we know how you can convert that into a gazebo.
Yeah.
It's all about repurposing this man.
Peev's trying to convince Cliff this is the wrong thing to do. Cliff is explaining to him how it all works. He can go down and help her. We can down at the nightclub in 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, Peev is telling him take a cab, which I wonder what that would have done to the pacing of the film. It's just, I got to get down there. Okay, I'll call a cab. Now we know the bus service around here is really good.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Because they don't even slow down when it's time to hop on, as we saw Jenny getting on, leaving the Bulldog. But
yeah, you're off to Hollywood. He can't be that far from Hollywood, I would think. He's at least over a hill. We know. I still think it's Burbank, but we've seen we've seen recent stuff where it's kind of in LAX. It's in the middle of LAX, which would be very far away. But somewhere in movie LA, he's just over the hill. He's on the other side of the Getty, where they're going to build the Getty Museum. So I'm guessing he's at Universal Studios. There's some mystical airfield there.
That would make sense.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting in this minute too, that the little, not nicknames, but just sort of the way that the Cliff and Peev address each other. Like Peevy's telling him, because Peev is really exasperated. He's about as worked up as we see him in this film. He said, we had an agreement, son, and it's just what he calls him son. He's angry, but there's this little bit of affection there too, a sort of familial affection. And then a couple lines later, Cliff is right back and say, brother, you've got my word on it. And it's interesting. They're just, these guys are family, but
in my head, the backstory that I'm hearing is that Peevy was friends with Cliff's dad. I get that strong feeling, and that he's like an uncle to him.
Right, and has always been there, and probably a mentor for Cliff as he's going into aviation and things like that. It just we don't need to know what that is, but I get that exact same vibe, and it does seem to resonate and provide kind of an undercurrent through the whole film. Yeah,
and I mean the age on the actors is right. I mean, I'm picturing Billy Campbell was probably about 10 years old when Alan Arkin was in Catch-22, so
right.
It seems about right that distance of age. Peevy is kind of his Obi-Wan.
Exactly. Yeah, his slightly crankier and more cantankerous Obi-Wan.
Yeah. He does convince him for the simple reason that he says, "Well, I love her, Peev."
Right.
And it's kind of an odd reaction though that he says, "Well, does she know that?"
Yeah, that's funny though, because that's a pretty common trope in movies of I'll take a stab, say sort of 30s to the 50s kind of thing. It seemed like later stories, we sort of moved past that, but there was a huge deal where a turning point of the film might be when the guy finally admits, yes, I like this girl, or like her, love her, whatever.
The Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed moment with the telephone, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
People are kind of convincing each other that yes, that's the actual way they're feeling about it. And it's kind of odd to have this quiet moment, this questioning moment, this emotional moment in the middle of what's ostensibly an action film.
It strengthens things a little bit. I from minute one, and even certainly in the graphic novels, but especially the film, the way it was brought to life. I spent this movie that first time in the theater, vacillating between, just sort of wanting to be Cliff Secord, or at least wanting to be friends with him. But then you stop and look at it, and he's not the most thoughtful guy. He hasn't done the best job so far, and we've talked about this before.
He's a bit self-centered, and
right.
He doesn't really understand the people around him, how they're thinking. It's mostly about his actions and what he can do to get it his way.
Right. And Jenny seems to be far more accepting and forgiving of his certainly risky and not necessarily stable career as a aspiring air race pilot, or ongoing air race pilot. But he's, as we've said, he's pretty dismissive of her role as an actress, and at least she's in films. That's not a small thing. And if she was up for a role with a line, for somebody who was, as Jennifer Connelly was at the time the movie was made, 19-year-old actress actually working.
In a Disney tentpole movie, that's pretty darn good.
Exactly. Or even in a movie like The Laughing Bandit.
Yeah.
So even just playing some scenery alongside the number 3 box office star in America.
Yeah, you get a line or two, you're okay.
So really, I think in some ways she's ahead of him. Although whatever successes Cliff and Peevy had to get to the point where they could, they use the term build when they talk about the GB, and that's not uncommon, but that almost certainly would have meant restoring. Because, it is a GB. We're not somehow pretending that Cliff and Peevy designed that airplane. They probably modified it quite a bit. But a lot of times you get a basket case airplane, a vintage airplane, and, you've got a crate full of parts and a data plate. You're technically restoring it, but really at the end of the day, you think of it as building because you're manufacturing so many new parts and things. So they certainly could have looked at their GB project as something they were building and then, didn't end well.
It's like George Washington's axe. He replaced the handle 5 times and the blade 3 times. It's
right. Really what are you left with?
Things to deal with. And of course, this particular, the X3 here, is in not a great shape. They found out about the bullet, which apparently happened that one time when they were all wrestling with stuff downstairs.
Right. Yeah, the X3 was sitting upstairs and picked up a ricochet.
Yeah. So they've got to do something about it. Of course, there's the engineering solution, and then there's the immediate solution,
right?
Which in this case happens to be a stick of Beeman's gum. Which we've talked a little bit about Beeman's in the past. One of the things that it's funny looking about it on the internet is that Beeman's gum is currently associated with being the aviator's gum, because we've seen it in this movie. We've of course seen it famously in The Right Stuff, with Chuck Yeager always asking for a piece of Beeman's. But
we see it in Tomorrowland.
Yeah, in Tomorrowland
with the jetpack, and hello to our friends at the Indiana Jones Minute. Even shows up in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the movie we usually don't talk about. The last one.
Yeah, but here we're seeing it here. But from what I understand, the only relationship that it has with airplanes is from people who've recently put it in movies about airplanes. That it really doesn't have a long-lasting relationship in the past. Mostly in the past, Beeman's was about you've got a tummy ache and you should eat Beeman's gum to calm it down because of the magic ingredient pepsin.
Now, as I understand it, so we see it in The Right Stuff, and Yeager bumming a stick of Beeman's off the guy. It is my understanding that that was at least based to some degree on some truth, and so there was that. Beeman started in what, the late 1800s or something like that. But I think by the late 40s and things in there was an association with it because of that sort of antacid and sense for aviation. But it was never marketed as, the gum for pilots or things, or certainly that I'm aware of.
Yeah, mostly it's about smoking. I think if you see pictures of pilots and stuff, it's either smoking or, different kinds of brands of cereal and such. Yeah, I mean, and Beeman's itself came from the Adams Gum Company, which was one of the oldest gums of the modern style gums that we eat. If you want, we'll go a little bit through the history of chewing gum here. But the common gum here was chewed with material called chicle that came out of a bunch of different trees, mostly that were grown in Central America and northern South America. That things like Wrigley's Doublemint gum, all those the Adams gums that we talked about previously, the Blackjack gum and Beeman's and even the clove gum. Chicle was a sticky gum, but it's funny. I was in reading about how far back they've actually found out that people have been chewing gum for well over like 6,000 years. They found in archaeological digs, they found tooth marks in birch bark tar, and apparently they had like multiple chews. So apparently they were using, ancient hunter-gatherers were using birch bark to chew on, or the gum that comes out of birch trees.
And even then, 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed were recommending birch for their patients who chewed bark tar.
Yes, it gets the mammoth marrow right off.
Mammoth marrow.
It's really odd though when you read about some of this stuff. I didn't realize that the first gum that was common in the Americas, the American Indians chewed it, but the other, the colonization of white settlers and all that came in and followed the Indians' lead by chewing spruce gum, the pitch that came out of a spruce tree. So They were basically chewing on like hunks of turpentine, as they like to describe it. And it's still available today. If you go to Amazon and look for spruce gum, you can buy all kinds of, there's one called Tree Hugger Spruce Gum. So
Wow.
It's this organic, paleo gum that you can chew on. So if you like the taste of turpentine.
I was going to say, or you could just get a lot of styrofoam and soak that in turpentine and make your own. But I don't think that's something we recommend here on the Rocketeer Minute.
Yeah, well, not that it gets much better though, because once they switched to chicle. That was what the Aztecs and the Incas used chicle, the center, which is latex. So you're chewing on latex, and a lot of the gums in the early 20th, late 18th or late 19th century, early 20th century used those. In '62 though, they switched over to a type of polymer ester that came out of an ester is when you mix an alcohol with carboxyl acid, and it forms this glue. Esters. Elmer's glue is made out of an ester like that. So it's basically the gum that you're using now is a vinyl that's similar to the white glue that you use, in schools and stuff. That's basically the base. When you're chewing bubble gum and things like that, it's a modified vinyl that you chew nowadays. That switch was such a big thing. Most of like Wrigley's company used chicle from Guatemala, and they actually owned gigantic chicle plantations in Guatemala. In the early 50s, the government of Guatemala changed it so that the landowners couldn't be from outside the country, and they gave it to the local, the farmers there. But at the time, Wrigley's didn't want to pay money to the farmers, so they pulled out entirely and switched over to this vinyl-based gum that we use nowadays. And it just about wrecked the economy of Guatemala because they had all this chicle that nobody was using anymore. Things like chiclets. Chiclet gum was made out of chicle, but now it's made out of a bunch of different types of polymers. So different. So it's not nice.
None of this sounds all that appealing. Yeah. And it makes me wonder, just last Thursday, we had John Bach from eBay on, and we got those Topps trading cards, and we were talking a bit about how, even the non-movie cards used to come with a stick of gum in there. And, you remembered it initially more fondly than I did. And the more I thought about it, I thought, I remember chomping on that stuff. But, if good gum is made from polymers and vinyl, I wonder what that was made out of.
It's made out of everything. Mostly they're derived from paraffin and petroleum waxes. There's things such as, I'm going to read a short list here, butadiene styrene, vinyl acetate, polyethylene. It's also, what happens is they have custom designed polyethylenes that are used to maximize elasticity and incorporate other components of the gum base so you can put in flavors and sweeteners. Otherwise, to get it to taste a little bit less like plastic.
Right, exactly.
And they have to make bubble gum a little different way from that so that it has things called elastomers, which lets it stretch out.
So here's a little bit of host trivia for you. It's not something that I admit very frequently. I'm not an avid gum chewer. I certainly have had gum many times over the years, but I have never once successfully blown a bubble. I'm completely baffled by how you do it. I believe I am completely incapable of blowing a bubble with a piece of bubble gum.
That is remarkable. I thought that was one of those basic things you're supposed to learn is that, when you're buying Topps bubblegum, Topps bubblegum is particularly hard to blow bubbles with.
Well, sure. But even I can remember trying Hubba Bubba and those sorts of things, Bazooka.
Not even Double Bubble?
Double Bubble. And now, of course, anytime you mention Bazooka, I think of those Bazooka Joe comics where I tried to laugh every time. And they were so Those jokes were so stale and so dry.
Eventually, it's almost as dry as the gum. But
Exactly.
I always look for the fortune, which I had a friend of mine growing up who passed recently. But he was absolutely surprised that he never knew there were fortunes at the bottom of Bazooka Joe comics. And once I pointed it out to him, he felt like he had missed hundreds and hundreds of fortunes that had just passed right by him.
So much powerful and good advice that he missed out on.
Wear a smile today.
Right.
Anyway, long time. So this is, we probably spent way too much time talking about gum, but that's what we're here for.
There's no such thing as too much time on any one topic.
After reading up on the history of bubblegum, though, it's going to be a long time before I put some of this stuff in my mouth. It's just, it is interesting, but the word acetate or vinyl for that matter, and food matter, it's gum base. The way it was described is a non-nutritive, non-digestible, water insoluble masticatory delivery system.
Wow, there's a slogan for you.
Yeah.
That's you got a future in gum marketing with that one, Jim.
Give me some of that.
Yes.
The good thing about it is it does stick to powder-coated aluminum.
Yes, thank goodness for that. And you get enough of it on there. It is not watertight, alcohol tight.
Yeah, apparently it can't be washed away with alcohol, at least, or whatever the fuel is that they're using.
It'll last a little bit. But,
and we do get to see the gum again. It's moved again. It's now a blob on the right-hand side.
Right.
And the last time we saw it was kind of flattened out across the middle.
At least this time, Alan Arkin isn't reaching into Billy's mouth.
Yeah.
To pry it out.
So it looks like Billy's saliva has held it on nice and tight. It's actually moved it a little bit, but maybe that was just from banging into Malcolm. So he gets it in there with a couple good taps, which I am guessing at that point. To me, it looks like silly putty, which is probably the same thing. I'm sure there's some kind of acetate that silly putty's made out of. Yeah,
that you're not supposed to eat. So now we're talking about the gum moving. Is it moving within this scene, or is it just moving from scene to scene? No, it moved
from the last place we saw it when it was back there under I think the last time we saw it was underneath the lamp.
Okay, right.
Before the gazebo happened.
That's right.
Now he's reattaching it to the left nacelle, so we're going to have to watch for it the next time we're back there. I believe that the next time we see the left nacelle, I think we'll see it in the appropriate place.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Of course, with that nice close up while Peev is applying it there, you get a little peek at that sort of copper colored cooling fan behind those veins, and just another one of those little design details that makes that X3 just so cool to look at.
Yeah, I do like looking at the tops of the nacelles because, knowing now from seeing the production features that some of them were built so that those caps would open up as kind of a fuel cap system on each side. It just makes it that much neater.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing. As we go through this minute and I've said so many times I would love to have high-res photos of these sets with the backgrounds in focus, and just so much little set dressing has gone on both upstairs and downstairs. Right when Peev is reaching for the helmet, we see that great old sort of that cloth-faced portable radio sitting there, and it's propped up, looks like by might even be like a Frisbee pie tin or some kind of a tin. And there's 3 spare Bulldog menus just sitting there on one of the crates. And then off to the right, you can see that Safeway ad that we've talked about before. We see a different section of it now. You see the pink salmon and the corned beef. Presumably, this is tacked up here because it's a newspaper article, and there's something on that left column and in the upper left of that. But I don't think we get a good look at what that is. But the Safeway ad takes up the rest of the paper. And then as we had talked about a little bit offline, as you look around the room, you see a box of Kellogg's Pep cereal, which is one that I know, Jim, you remember from your childhood.
Yeah, being old.
Being old.
I can remember these things. And Pep cereal was, if memory serves, it was kind of the knockoff brand for Wheaties. I mean, it's a Kellogg's brand. It's like the Pepsi to Coke kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Kellogg's, it was, their bran flakes, and they considered their rival to Wheaties. And it was produced until the late 70s, which means it certainly would have crossed over into my childhood. I'm roughly your age, a little bit younger, but I don't mean to advertise that. I don't know. It was funny because certainly in terms of advertising, my brothers and I remember all the cereals from when we were kids. We very rarely had them in our house. We weren't a big cereal family. That was something that was, except for Wheaties. Dad would have Wheaties and maybe occasionally some Raisin Bran. But what was interesting to me about the Pep cereal started in 1923. It was one of the first cereals that came around where they had, touting the extra health benefits, which of course was a big deal for Kellogg and their whole branding and their health focus, right or wrong. But it was amped up with vitamins. It was even advertised as having mildly laxative properties, which awesome. It's bran flakes. It makes sense. And I see that and I sort of chuckle, but then realize, okay, now we see cereals and they add fiber and we tend to know what that's for. It's sort of the same thing.
There's entire yogurt lines that are supposed to help get things through.
Right.
So and I can remember, gosh, for years they kept pushing Uncle Sam cereal, which I think is still available if you look around, but the primary ingredient of it was supposed to be, because it had flax in it, and it was supposed to be, it makes a great bulk natural laxative. I guess you sell to an audience.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it goes.
That's what you do. So in the 40s, right about the end of World War II, they started putting these pin back buttons. I think of them as buttons or pins, however you prefer, into Pep cereal, and they started with like the squadrons out of the U.S. Army Air Forces and then some of the newspaper comic characters. They really became associated with the Adventures of Superman on radio. So they were a tight sponsor, and of course, eat Pep cereal and you'll not only be a little bit more regular, but perhaps you'll be able to fly and stop bullets and that sort of thing. There was some great photos on the web if you dig around and look at the Pep pins. There's 80 something of these great designs, beautiful artwork of the day, sort of Dick Tracy, Superman, all kinds of stuff like that. Back when when you got a prize in cereal, it was actually something kind of cool.
It wasn't an ad for more cereal.
Right, exactly. Eat your Ovaltine or drink more Ovaltine. For a while, they rebranded Pep as the Sunshine cereal, and then at some point, I don't have an exact year, but looking at the artwork, going with late 50s into the early 60s, they rebranded it the Solar cereal. So Kellogg's Pep, the Solar cereal, and they became a sponsor of the Tom Corbett Space Cadet radio show and then TV show. And the artwork on these boxes is just fantastic. I think anybody who likes the aesthetic of the Rocketeer, if you extrapolated that aesthetic from 1938 in the Rocketeer and went to about 1957, where you start seeing spaceships and bubble helmets and these amazing rockets with these big swept wings and
those Chesley Bonestell kind of
exactly. Yeah. Very much right out of the Chesley Bonestell playbook. There's even one with some jetpacks, and there's somebody, an astronaut flying around Jupiter on one of these. Great looking art, and unfortunately the kind of thing that makes me want to go out and round up some old boxes of Pep cereal, which is the absolute last thing I need to do is start collecting something like this. But it's very cool stuff.
Yeah, there was so much entertainment in boxes of cereal back then.
There really was. I do have a book somewhere in my library that is just cereal box art. Probably about the only one out there that's really been done definitively on it. I wish I can spot it on the shelf. My headphones won't reach to tell you the author, but it is. If you're interested in this kind of thing, take a look for that book, and it's a great tour through all this wonderful art and just look back at different times.
It all went downhill when they switched from the word sugar to the word golden.
Yes.
I miss Sugar Smacks.
Right. Yes, exactly. Instead of golden
sugar crisps and things like that.
Yep. Yeah. And then we're ashamed of sugar.
Yeah. I mean, one of the mascots was Sugar Bear.
Right.
He's like Golden Bear. He's Sugar Bear.
He's Sugar Bear. And
just a tragedy.
And then his cousin was on Starsky and Hutch or something. Somehow that all tied together.
Paul Michael Glaser did so much to change the world.
That's what I've always said.
So we're watching, he gets the gum in the right spot on the nacelle. Cliff said, stand back.
Right.
What'd you say? Which is, never walk toward an engine.
And yet we're continuing to establish that trope that when Cliff takes off, Peevy has to be knocked over.
But that's for another day.
That's true. We're not quite there yet.
And I noticed in this last scene, we're looking at the back of the bulldog. We're looking at the bulldog's haunches or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, that's true. He's walked out of the back of the bulldog's neck. which not a phrase I expected to use today when I got out of bed. But
so he gets out there with the little porthole kind of door,
and
a carefully crafted cove door. I wouldn't have imagined they would have spent that much time on it, but I guess it fit, so there they went. That's not an easy bit of carpentry.
Well, it makes you wonder too what I don't know how much else we see of what else is up and back. Is there a little sitting area? Is there a ladder off the tail of the dog?
I think there's a walkway of stairs. There's somewhere in many of possibly in the official souvenir guide. A schematic of this, but I think there's a stairway that goes upstairs there. It's just a place to put even more of those orange crates.
Exactly. You can never have too many.
But as we talked with Billy, he believes that was a wild wall that they could remove and put on. So that may be how they filmed those scenes inside, and then they just dropped in the last attachment here to get the final scene. They could shoot the whole thing up in Valencia without having to relocate the cast and crew.
Isn't that amazing?
So clever idea.
Amazing.
Beautifully lit. The very last frame that we're looking at in minute 61 is the Rocketeer looking skyward, his fin carefully lit, just sparkling off the back of his left nacelle there as he's getting ready to ride. And
it's great too when you look at the lighting on the helmet. The helmet is gorgeous, but we see a few little sort of dimples and and imperfections that remind us this was handmade on a kitchen counter.
Yeah,
and to us it's this. It's this magnificent relic. It's a wonderful work of art. This perfect Art Deco, bit of Art Deco aesthetic, but very nice to see just a little bit of it. And I don't think this isn't prop quality hardware coming through. I think that's very purposeful. That the metal is going to be just a tiny bit uneven, and because Peev was peening it, as we learned earlier.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's basically a B+ in shop class. So
exactly.
He did okay in metalworking, and just needs to work a little bit harder on his fit and finish. It's a great place to end this particular minute, but a great start to the week here.
Absolutely.
And, we're going to have. Am I right in assuming? Hang on, let me see. Yes, I am right in assuming that tomorrow. Well, you'll have to wait for the fanfare, but I think we're going to have a special guest on tomorrow.
Another special episode.
And we will chat a little bit more about this takeoff and liftoff and where the Rocketeer is headed next. Hopefully it's only a 5-minute drive, but we'll see. We can time it tomorrow. For folks who want to talk some more about this particular minute or get in some more of their memories of gum and cereal, we're happy always to talk on social media. So check us out, all the usual places: Twitter, Rocketeer Minute; Facebook, facebook.com/Rocketeer Minute. Find us on the big site, rocketeerminute.com. Catch up on all the previous episodes. Please, if you haven't subscribed already, we're in the second hour. You've really got to do this. Go out to either Google Play or iTunes, type in Rocketeer Minute and 2 words, and click subscribe when our search results come out okay. And please leave us a review. We just got another wonderful review out there. Thank you very much. We do appreciate. We read every review out there, and we Hal and I high-five each other. They like it. They really like us. So it always makes us feel good. So if you want to keep making us feel good, please leave a great review. We always appreciate them very much. So thank you. Thank you for those who have left reviews. I just want to let you know that your appreciation is appreciated. But join us here tomorrow. We'll talk some more about the Rocketeer and as we watch Liftoff here on the Rocketeer Minute. So until tomorrow, over and out.